Brazilian Shirt Name Podcast with Dotun Adebayo and Tim Vickery.
Yeah, welcome to Wednesday's edition of the Brazilian Shirt Name Podcast. The Legendino in place in Rio. Always amuses me that you wear an Argentina shirt when you're in Brazil, Tim. You might want to explain that one later on. Oh, I thought it would be. But it's great to have our good old friend Miguel Pereira with us. He's the author, if you don't know already, of Pasión, which took us through to the soul of Spanish football, of which he is an expert. Miguel, really great to have you back. And on what should I say? On an occasion which follows the night before, if you see what I mean. And the night before, Vinicius Jr. was in the headlines again as Real Madrid met Benfica of Portugal in the Champions League. Please explain what went on.
Well, I think Tim will have a lot to say about this as well. So just to be sure, I think what we witnessed yesterday was one of the strangest and sad events of the season, as supposedly, let's say supposedly, because it's not been proved, and I think it will be hard to be proved despite everything that anyone saw through television or the ones who are at the stadium. Cristiano racially abused Vinicius after he was celebrating on a corner and got yellow carded for celebrating on a corner. A fabulous goal that gave Real Madrid the win. So after that, everything went bonkers. The game stopped for 10 minutes because UEFA has a racism protocol that has to be put in place. But since the referee could not assert that what Vinicius was telling him was true, that Cristiano had called him monkey, used the Spanish word mono, which is used despectively to call anyone from being black race as a monkey. So one of the worst words you can say to anybody in any situation. Some Real Madrid players approached the referee and said they had heard Cristiano say that. Cristiano said instead that he called Vinicius a faggot, which is not properly a good thing to be proud of saying to anyone as well, but it wasn't a racist call according to him. Then Mourinho intervened as he would, and he approached Vinicius to try to calm the situation down, but later on in the press conference he said he couldn't trust the version of anyone in particular because he believed in both. And essentially we got a beautiful game of football ruined by another episode of the endemic racism that we have in Europe, sadly, today, that we always had and will probably always have, because it's one of the problems as a society that we have, and football expresses it probably better than most.
Yeah, Tim, any thoughts on this?
Well, this again, it's involving someone from Argentina, isn't it? Cristiano. And Argentina is a country that I find very, very difficult to understand. There are contradictions there that it's really hard to understand, and one of them is over the issue of race. A friend of mine, is Uruguayan. He's a black sociologist, so you think he's pretty well placed to talk about racism in Argentina. He lived in Buenos Aires for years. He said he never suffered anything. But there is no doubt about it. That racism is there. There's no doubt about it whatsoever. And football, as Miguel said, always seems to bring this to the surface. Always. And part of it is they haven't understood that, or a significant part of them have not understood that this is unacceptable, that this is a line that cannot be crossed, that there are things that you can do in the course of the football field, but normal reality is not suspended. Anti-racism is not suspended because you're in a football stadium. And now there are problems every time a Brazilian team goes to play in Argentina. Every time. You will always see Argentine fans doing monkey gestures. Always. Every game. It happened outside a football context here in Rio just a couple of weeks ago. This is an Argentine lawyer. She's on holiday. She got in some disputes with a shop worker or a restaurant waiter and was making monkey gestures to him and ended up in prison because of it. And the Argentine press are trying to say to their population, look, there are things that in our country we think of as a joke. In Brazil, it's against the law. And you all saw that song that Enzo Fernandez and company were singing there with the Argentina team, which was there's no doubt about it. You know, it was extremely racist. So it is not only European racism. This is Argentine racism as well. And there is plenty of racism in Brazil. Remember that Brazil didn't abolish slavery until 1888. Vinny Jr. knew all about racism before he went to Spain. But there is this question, isn't there? Why is it always him? Why him? And I think there are a number of reasons, a number of explanations for this. One, that he is almost African black. He's very, very black. Retinto, as we say over here. You know, some of the great Ronaldo. You know, no, I'm white. Are you? Are you? You know, and in Brazil's fluidity, that can pass if you've got enough money. But with Vinny, there's never any pass. He is black. No doubt about it. So that's part of it. Another thing is he's just so good. And his style of play is a style of play where he's very, very visible because he's on the ball for prolonged periods of time when he's taking on his man. It's a very dramatic style of play, which drags attention to it. And another is he's just not having it. He's not having it, you know, and he won't, and he will stand up, and he will. I personally think, Miguel, you are much closer and much better placed than me for this. But I actually think he's done Spanish society a massive favour, because you can't hide from this now. It's been obvious in so many of the stadiums where he's played in Spain. It's just absolutely obvious. Happily, it seems that in Spain, there have been far fewer incidents recently than there were the season before. So perhaps they're making progress. And if they are making progress, I think Vinny has done a great deal there to bring this question, this societal problem to attention, because you can't deal with it without acknowledging that it is a problem. Is that fair, Miguel?
Answer that, yeah, but just before you answer that, I wonder, and I apologize for just coming in here, I wonder if Jose Mourinho would add to what Tim has already said about the reasons why Vinicius is a target for this kind of abuse. He would add, given what he said yesterday, Miguel, he would add, yeah, and because when he scores a goal, he's too cocky with it as well. And that seemed to be what Jose Mourinho was saying after the match yesterday. And it got a huge backlash. I saw instantly, you know, certainly from all the black players commentating like Thierry Henry, etc. Do you mind explaining a little bit about that, and then feel free to bring in what Tim was asking?
And the irony is, we're talking about the cockiest manager ever, probably. He was practically abusing the morality of Vinicius going to celebrate a beautiful cold goal that he scored. And he was the guy that ran the touchline at Old Trafford. He was the guy that had the Camp Nou silence and all the other celebrations that we know of him. So the irony is that Mourinho is the ultimate hypocrite in terms of football, philosophy, and sociology, and all the kinds of analysis that you can take from society, particularly Portuguese society, into the game. So I think what Mourinho did yesterday was, he's still a very respected people in Madrid. So he's really well beloved. Arbeloa spoke wonders of him before the tie, already before the tie in the group stage. So he didn't want to be vocal against Vinicius, but at the same time, he has that mentality. He has to protect his own, regardless of what they do. So I think if Cristiano would punch Vinicius directly in the face, he would find an excuse for it, because that's what Mourinho is. His truth is that it's my truth, it's my players, it's my reality. I don't care about the other people's morale. And he never did. And after 25 years of career, we don't expect him to change now. So I think that's one of the main reasons why he said what he said. I personally think that Mourinho probably doesn't believe half the things he says in public. I think it's all part of the persona. He's always have been. And yesterday he was in a very difficult situation, and he explained it the worst possible way, but at the same time the only way that he could, to try to be um, pleasing both Greeks and Trojans, like the youth saying says. And in the end, it just ended up messing it up and losing the respect of so many people who wanted more for someone who has been in the game for so long and really understands that football needs to take a stance. And taking directly what Tim was said before, I think football, like he said, is a world where people believe there are no rules. And that starts when you play the game as a kid. It starts when managers say that you have to abuse your rivals to get over them. It starts with a philosophy that you can use all type of words within the pitch, because the famous stance that what happens in the pitch stays in the pitch has been entwined into the player's mentality. At the same time, fans believe that if they pay a ticket, they have the right to abuse whoever they want. So that sort of mentality never really left the game. And we are evolving as society brilliantly over the past few years, but football has been done the opposite way. And I think what happens with Vinicius, and to add what Tim said, I basically agree with everything, is that society is getting worse. People are getting more racist through the day. People are getting more hate through social media. So Laurie Cunningham, one of the most brilliant footballers England ever had, repeatedly said that he suffered much more abuse in the UK than playing in Spain, that he wasn't treated as a black person in Spain so violently as he had been in the UK in the late 70s and then in the 1980s. And there were a lot of fascinating black skinned players who thrived in football in Spain throughout the 80s, the 90s, and 2000s. And except for the case of Samuel Eto'o, probably no one actually really took a stand, and nobody actually really try to do what Vinicius has been trying to do. That is, this is my red line. I will not allow people to cross it. I will not be silent. And I think as Tim was saying, he has been doing a favor to Spanish football as a whole. And he has been criticized mostly because he is someone who will not shut up just to take things for granted, just to take things lightly. And I think not only about regarding racist, but also regarding other types of discrimination, homophobia, gender discrimination, creed discrimination, everything must be abolished of a football pitch. And I think today you cannot do that whether you are in work, whether you are with your mates, but in the football pitch, people still believe they can, and they can get away with it. And that's the sad thing, that football institutions like FIFA, UEFA, the local federations, and the football clubs are the first ones that need to take a stand. And what Benfica did yesterday, trying to excuse this player with statements released in the social media, with the president of Benfica, the famous player Rui Costa, trying also to state that the player had done nothing wrong. The same with Mourinho. It doesn't help anyone. Doesn't help Benfica. Doesn't help the player who committed the racial abuse. Doesn't help Vinicius or other players who feel they suffer racial abuse or other kind of abuse on the pitch. And that's a sad lesson to take from yesterday.
And it certainly doesn't help the reputation and the memory of the late great Eusebio that Jose Mourinho and perhaps even the club itself, Benfica, insisted, well, that they couldn't be racist because they're the club of Eusebio from the 1960s and early 70s. Yeah, that was
Still, because
unfortunate.
Benfica was the first football club in Portugal back in the 1930s to have the first black-skinned footballer in Portugal in the league. And he was a brilliant player called Guilherme Espírito Santo. He also come from Angola. So he was the first one. And then players like Mario Coluna, Eusebio, of course, and throughout the decades, Benfica enjoyed so much thanks to the players who were born in Africa, were born in South America, were black skin, we even were born in Portugal, but are black skin through their families. That a club like that cannot use the excuse that I have a friend who is also black skin. It was like saying that. It was like a bar conversation, Benfica statement. It was like just having a conversation with your mates in the pub with no logic whatsoever. And they should know better.
You're listening to, and perhaps even watching live and direct, the Brazilian Shirt Name podcast. This is how we do it on a Wednesday. On a Thursday at 4 p.m, we open up to our Global Soccer Interactive. Make sure that you subscribe to the pod in the usual place, just under where you're looking at the screen now. And also, of course, join in our Facebook group, a WhatsApp group, Brazilian Shirt Name podcast WhatsApp group as well. to find out what's going on, and so that you don't miss an episode. As we've come to a sort of a moment of reflection. It talked about Spanish football. I was going to say, by the way, it just as a joke, I don't know if you would take it as a joke, Miguel, that for all Vinicius has done for Spanish football, he doesn't seem to have done much for Portuguese football, you know? I mean, what's going on? No, but for real though, Spain and Portugal are focal points in the World Cup coming up. And we've billed this episode as, you know, which one of those teams is going to win a World Cup if push comes to shove. Please hold your thoughts till towards the end of this conversation, because I want to keep people in suspense. But when I look through the squads of both teams, I was like, whoa, these are going to be difficult to get through, to win the battle of the midfield in particular. I don't know where this World Cup, or at least these two national teams' World Cups, are going to be won and lost.
Yeah, I think both Portugal and Spain are among the, I would say, 5 to 6 favorites to win the World Cup, alongside Brazil and Argentina, of course, because they always have to be in. And now I would add France and England as well to the pool. And I think both nations have two very good things in their favor and two things that are against them. Different things, but that explains a little bit of their frailties, but also of their power. As you mentioned, I think the quality of the midfield of both teams are probably the best in the world right now. And if the players are without injuries, if the players are in good shape like they were at the end of last season when we saw the League of Nations final and we saw one hell of a football match between both sides that ended in the penalty shootout, but it was a massive football game as it had been in the semifinals. We know we are going to witness the best players probably in the world in those positions. We're talking about Pedri, we're talking about Vitinha, we're talking about Rodri, of course, and Zubimendi, but also João Neves. So a lot of classic players there, veteran players as well, like Bernardo Silva, like Bruno Fernandes. So all those names, of course, make people believe that they are really the top of the class in their positions on midfield. What they do have, both sides, is a huge problem with their center forward. Spain, because they don't have none. So, and Portugal, because they have Cristiano Ronaldo. So that is an issue in a sense that we all know Cristiano's personality. We all know the massive influence he has on the Portuguese game. And we all know he's going to play in the World Cup, regardless of the physical condition he's in, regardless of if he's suited or not for the type of game that Portugal should be playing with the quality midfield they have at their disposal. So for Portugal, having one of the best players in history being an issue is like if Pelé wanted to play the 1978 World Cup in Argentina. It will be probably a situation very similar, and it wouldn't work out. And probably it will not work out as well for Portugal. And in case of Spain, they don't have none. Alvaro Morata, who played in the last tournaments, has not been called regularly. You had Samu, which was a promising striker from Porto, got injured, will not be able to play the World Cup. And then Mikel Oyarzabal and Mikel Merino are two players that are not exactly center forwards, that they connect well with the idea of the Spanish passing game, but they are not the deadly forwards that you would like to take to a World Cup or to a Euros where they are much needed. And then, of course, Spain has an extra issue with injuries. So you had Nico Williams, who was the decisive player in the last Euros they won. He had been injured for months now. He hasn't been playing well. And some are saying that he should go to the surgery and just be gone with it. And he's trying to force himself into the World Cup. But that never works, really. We all know that players who try to force themselves into this kind of competitions, then they don't end up performing at their best. And then you have, of course, the injuries on Pedri, the injuries on Rodri that we don't know how it will be come June. Also Merino, which was a vital player, both for Spain and Arsenal as well, could be an absent. So that will be an issue for Spain. And for Portugal, the other issue is that they lack that fighting, killing spirit that they would probably need to win a competition like the World Cup. They have the quality, the individual quality, but they don't still behave as a team. Probably because of Ronaldo in one way, probably because Robert Martinez is a manager who has already proven with Belgium that is better accommodating the egos of the top players than to create a system that actually works. So I would say those are the two biggest issues against and the two biggest issues in favor of both Portugal and Spain going all the way. But if you look at the names and if you look at the squads, it's impossible not to believe they will be at least in the semifinals, except if they try to meet each other between then on the last 16, last 8 round.
Yeah. Spain, of course, have a wonder kid that Portugal doesn't have in Lamine Yamal. It's incredible. He's still a teenager, isn't he? I believe, but every time you see him, you're thinking he's got to be in for a shout of perhaps one of the 5 best footballers in the world at the moment. And I'm being generous when I say 5. If you ask me privately, I'd pare it down to maybe 2 or 3. However, from what I've seen, and in big competitions, for a young kid like that, is just scintillating. Could he win the World Cup for Spain? Not by himself. We know that that's not how it happens, but nevertheless, be the MVP, as the Yanks would say. Could he propel Spain to win the World Cup?
Of course. Let's take again the example of Pele, having Tim here as well. Of course, Pele didn't win the World Cup in '58 for Brazil. They had a massive squad full of great players, but he was decisive. And Yamal did the same in the Euros for Spain when he was 2 years younger than now, and now he has evolved. And for me, there's no discussion. He's on the top 3 best players in the world, and he's probably the most talented player in the world, whether he's able to perform regularly, where he's able to have a career as long as the likes of Messi or Cristiano, or if he ends up like a Neymar, we don't know. We'll have to wait and see. But right now, he has been evolving as a football player under Hansi Flick at Barcelona. He's getting better every time he plays. He understands more about the game, not just that individual brilliancy that he already had when he started to play for Barca 2 years ago. And I actually think going to the World Cup, he will be probably the most decisive, influential individual player in the competition. Now, he also has the ability to connect with that collective idea of Spanish football. When we think of Spanish football, the great generation of Spanish football, they all look the same as football players. They were very talented midfielders who played in different positions rather than midfield. You had midfielders playing as attacking forwards. You had midfielders playing on the wing. Now Spain do have specialists on different positions. They have the midfielders, but they also have the wingers. They also have the right and left back who can project themselves. And Yamal, despite being a great individual player, he understands the passing game because it comes from Barcelona. So he grew up in that culture. So that's one of the greatest things in favor of the Spanish idea of getting back to that World Cup throne that they already had in 2010 with a different side, a side that plays not the same passing, slow tempo game, but a side that can be more spectacular, even if that also makes him a more frail in case of counterattacks or in case of their best players not performing at their highest level. But I do think that Yamal will be the player to watch if you have to ask me before the World Cup. As we said years ago of Messi, of Ronaldo, of Neymar, for instance.
I don't think you can talk about this coming World Cup without going in depth into the conditions. The extreme heat. And the last time it was in the USA, 94, Brazil won with a very midfield heavy side. It was a side that more or less left the 2 strikers, Romario and Bebeto, it left them on their own. The midfield didn't contribute any goals. I think there was one from a penalty spot, maybe. But they did balance out the side. And it was a side that were capable of retaining possession in extreme heat, protecting the defence in extreme heat, and also changing the rhythm. And if I look at Spain, I can see that they have all of those qualities. And I wonder, in the conditions that this World Cup is going to be played, if the absence of a world-class centre-forward will bite as much as it might if it was being played in cooler conditions. Because Spain can pass the legs off their opponents, can't they, in the heat? Although I think they've been lucky with the draw. Their first 2 matches will be played in an air-conditioned stadium. So that will take less out as the tournament goes on. That will take less out of them. There's also a very powerful incentive to top the group, to finish first, because if they top the group, their route to the final, the 4 knockout games they have afterwards, 2 of them are also in air-conditioned stadiums, and there's the likelihood that if they top their group, they will avoid the possibility of a second round tie against Argentina. So do you think, Miguel, that in the conditions that this World Cup will be played, that Spanish midfield is going to be the most important factor?
Yeah, it will be decisive. In comparison with that Brazil brilliant side of '94, very, very ill-remembered by some supporters, even in Brazil, because they weren't as spectacular as the Tele Santana sides. But that Brazil didn't have wingers. So width was provided by the right back and the left back, of course. And you had Leonardo and Branco on the left, and then you had on the right, was it Jorginho?
Jorginho.
On the right?
Yeah, Jorginho.
Jorginho,
Who got injured in the final, and Cafu came on for him in the final.
In Cafu. So they basically provided the width, while Spain do have the wingers to also provide that width and to also manage a way to penetrate, particularly on defenses of smaller teams that will probably hold on for results. Because of the weather, most of the teams will not play at a high tempo game. I think it will. We already saw that on the Club World Cup. It will be very hard to be playing a pressing high tempo game. So we'll probably have a lot of teams sitting deep, biding their time. And probably if you have a side with so much talented midfielders or players who are not directly midfielders but who interpreted the game as Lamine does, similar to what a midfielder would do, then they probably will take that advantage. And of course, like Tim said, the conditions will be absolutely decisive. It happened in Mexico in '70 and '86. It happened in the States in '94, and it will happen again.
There seems to be, I mean, for the right reasons, talk about the midfield. It seems to kind of negate what the defence have to do to a certain extent, even in this heat. When Portugal do advance forward, it does seem like it's going to be a fast-moving, last third for them, that defenders will have to pick up the speed to contain their, what they have. If it's just Cristiano Ronaldo up front, I doubt it. There'll be two supporting strikers, wouldn't there?
Well, I imagine Portugal has, through Martinez, evolved tactically. They have not played the same over the last 2 years. He even tried a three-man defense to give more liberty to Nuno Mendes on the left, particularly to be an attacking force. So he usually plays different tactics depending on the rival he faces. And what I actually do think is that Nuno Mendes will be decisive if this fit, because he's the one that will bring that width on the left to allow Ronaldo to play, because we know Ronaldo doesn't move a lot, or if he does, he moves into the wrong places at the right time, because he's always searching for the ball like he was 18 or 21 instead of staying in position. We already saw that in the last Euros, in the last World Cup, in the last League of Nations.
I thought Miguel, I thought Portugal in the Euro, from what I can remember of the Euros, I thought Portugal were just delusional. I couldn't understand what was happening at all, because if you're going to play him, then you got to have wingers who go out. And they had two inverted wingers coming in. And so you're thinking, well, Cristiano Ronaldo at the age he is, he's just speaking a different footballing language from the people who are supposed to be creating for him. And I imagine that's why Martinez had a look with a back three and Nuno Mendes bombing forward, because at least then you've got the possibility of someone going outside and supplying crosses for Cristiano Ronaldo. So do you think that things have been learnt from the Euros? It's a less delusional team? And is there any way that they can come to a conclusion that, you know what, we'd be better off without him? And why isn't that emotionally possible? Why not?
As a Portuguese supporter, I really hope they do find a formula, but I'm very skeptical, probably because we all saw what Martinez did with Belgium. And as I mentioned before, it's all about managing egos for him. And you have a situation where you have three of your biggest egos play almost in the same squares of grass. You have Bruno Fernandes, you have Bernardo Silva, and you have Cristiano. And they end up just picking against one another. And if you have to play Vitinha, because you have to play Vitinha, remember, for Martinez, Vitinha wasn't a player to be played until the last League of Nations. He was used as a sub regularly. João Neves was used as a right back in many occasions because he didn't knew how to fit so many egos in the first 11 that he had to invent different tactics just for getting everyone happy. So that's an issue for Portugal because they are not optimizing what they have. They are trying to optimizing the egos that they have in the dressing room. And that has been an issue under Martinez as it had been under Fernando Santos. And also, I think what happened in the League of Nations and what made Cristiano be so decisive, especially in the semifinals, was when Martinez really understood that he had to play Pedro Neto and he had to play Francisco Conceição, because those were the wingers that tried to beat their opponent and try to cross the ball, whether Cristiano actually can make a difference right now.
Yes.
And he also has to persuade Cristiano to stay in the box, because if you see a match of Portugal with him, he's always trying to move out of the box, like he was a player that he is no longer. So the great lesson that Martinez probably has learned through the qualifying phases, through the League of Nations, is Cristiano needs to be in the box if he has to play, and he has to play. The last time a manager tried not to play him, he was sacked. Fernando Santos was sacked during the World Cup in Qatar because he benched Cristiano. And the days between that match against Switzerland, which Portugal hammered Switzerland, it was one of the best Portuguese matches in the World Cup. And then the match against Morocco, he was butchered in the press. He was butchered by Cristiano's wife. He was butchered by Cristiano's mother. He was butchered by everyone who had an opinion. And I actually don't think Martinez is into it. I don't think he really appreciates the idea of being butchered for 3 weeks in the United States just because he isn't playing Cristiano. So I think he is going to play him anyway. And also, Portugal lacks a very good number 9 to play when Cristiano is not in. So if Portugal had a Harry Kane sort of player that is being benched so Cristiano can play, you probably would hear more of a uproar. But then again, it's Gonçalo Ramos is the alternative. And Gonçalo Ramos is being benched at PSG as well. So he has a good argument when he says, okay, Cristiano is playing, he's scoring goals even if in Saudi Arabia, and we know the quality of the league in Saudi Arabia. But it's the guy who can play instead of him is being benched by Luis Enrique. So probably is not the best choice to be the front striker. And also Juan Felix, who's also playing Saudi Arabia now and has been playing under Martinez, is also being called up in front of Gonçalo Ramos as a sole striker. So it's all about the egos, and Portuguese football suffered that from the 1980s. Every good generation of Portuguese footballers had those giant egos like Figo, like Rui Costa, like back in the day, the generation of Chalana, Fernando Gomes. All those stories are incredible and also explain why Portugal, having so much talent at their disposal in different generations, never actually quite was able to win anything, except the time they had no talent at all. Because when they win the 2016 title in France, it was probably the worst Portuguese national side in a long time. And because there were no egos and players were willing to fight for every ball like it was the end of the world, they were just lucky to be there. And Portugal actually was able to compete and to win something.
I'm staggered by this. I didn't know this, that after the Switzerland game, which was fabulous in the World Cup when they didn't have Cristiano Ronaldo, instead of days celebrating, there were days attacking the manager for not picking Cristiano Ronaldo. That isn't very healthy, is it? From a kind of mental health point of view, there's something has gone wrong there. What is it? Is a line from Brecht? Sad is a nation that needs idols.
True story. And Portugal is a nation that, for instance, the role that Portugal has attributed both to Cristiano and Mourinho is because they are the two individuals who are bigger than the nation itself. So everyone around the world knows Cristiano Ronaldo as a figure, and they know Jose Mourinho as a figure, but they don't necessarily know that they are Portuguese. And most of the people that know him don't even know where Portugal is in the map. So Portugal is a nation, I don't know if it is because of all the years in dictatorship, it's because they had a very big empire that was lost, and then there's that sad reflection of the best days gone. But they actually found in the figure of Mourinho, Cristiano, something to be proud of when they started to win. And now they cannot get hold of the idea of letting them go when the time has come. So they will stick to them until the end, even if that brings a tragedy, which will probably will.
My grandson just started school again. The new school year started recently, 8 years old. And he goes to school in his new school bag, which is a Cristiano Ronaldo school bag. He loves Cristiano Ronaldo. But I think he doesn't associate Cristiano Ronaldo with Portugal. So that's exactly the point you were making, I think.
Yeah.
There's a few questions I have, actually, but let me, because we haven't got a huge amount of time, let's try and wrap up a few things. I think it is interesting, you know, how a World Cup is able to bring about these child prodigies, you know, or they rise to the game. It's not just World Cups, it's big tournaments, but the World Cup seems to have a kind of a magic.
There ain't nothing bigger, is there? There ain't nothing bigger.
Yeah,
you know,
but
so it is the launching pad, isn't it, for a Pele or a Michael Owen or
It's definitely the opportunity, although they say you can't win anything with kids. However, I wonder also with Cristiano Ronaldo and Portugal whether they could imagine him there winning the World Cup for them, whether that's a reality or whether Portugal or Portuguese football supporters accept that that's a hindrance, an unnecessary luxury that they've got to carry on the way to the World Cup, and how they feel. Do they accept that they probably won't win it because they've got this one luxury item that they've got to take with them?
That's the saddest part. They do. I remember I was criticizing Martinez a lot during the last few years because of the years of Cristiano Ronaldo, and the majority of comments that I had from people from Portugal was like, you had to be thankful what he did for us as a nation. So I don't care if we don't win. If he wants to play until he's 48, if he wants to play the 2030 World Cup, if he wants to play alongside his kid, just let him, because he already done so much for us that we actually don't care. Even if we have this true great possibility to win the World Cup, we have a title at the shot. And also, I think the greatest issue with me regarding Cristiano Ronaldo is Cristiano himself, because Cristiano, who has already been awarded multiple times Best Player of the World, so he has won a lot of Champions League, 5 or 6. He already won in Euros. He could be the first one to say, okay, I'm not fit to play every single match. I'm not at my best, but I'm here to support the young players. I'm here to give them, share my experience. I'm here to help them become better players. And when I can help, I will help. That sort of leader mentality would be decisive to unleash emotionally a lot of the younger players into perform better. But no, he needs to be the protagonist. 90 minutes, he needs to score that 1,000 goal record as soon as possible. He needs to be the guy who's on every photo, is on every single moment. So that's the biggest issue, because he could have a role similar to what Messi had 4 years ago, probably will have in this tournament. Just let everyone around him be better because of him and not being conditioned by him. But
which one of us would do that? For real?
But see, this is the question, isn't it? Because if he were capable of doing that, he would probably never have become Cristiano Ronaldo in the first place. It's a bit like it's the eternal thing of, like, say, Dylan Thomas. You can't have Dylan Thomas without the alcohol. You can't. Sometimes the flaws and the virtues, they're the same thing. They're part of the same thing. It's very rare to have the idol who doesn't have a little bit of feet of clay. It's the George Michael line, isn't it? A star is made up not of extra things, but of things that are missing. It's things that are missing that makes the star. The need for affection or something like that makes the star. So it would be great if he were able to, because he would be a fabulous player to come off the bench. You need a goal. There are 20 minutes to go. You need a goal, so the game is going to be played in their half, in their penalty area. It's a great time to bring him on. But I don't think he would accept that role, would he? He wouldn't want that role. He wants to be the main man from the start. But maybe if he were more amenable, he would never have become the player that he is in the first place. Yeah,
totally agree. The thing is, when you're 40 already and you have lived through so 41. Many things, 41. Yeah, because I will be 42 and I'm a year older than him. So probably life would have told you some lessons that you probably should have learned. And of course, it hurts when you see, like Tim says, an idol for so many not being able to learn from past mistakes and to be a better version of himself. And he will never be that. And probably that's one of the reasons that I don't think Carlo Ancelotti will take Neymar to the World Cup, because it will probably be a condition element against the younger kids who are probably trying to make the names for themselves. And that's one of the things that made Messi special for Argentina, that it really created that community around him where he was still being decisive on the pitch, but also if he performed badly, and I think he's been performing poorly over the past few years, it doesn't matter. The fact that he's there is enough. And the players around him can perform at their best even when he's not around, because they perform better for him as well as for them. And I think Cristiano, if he was able to create that sense that you can win this World Cup for me, as an end of my brilliant career, but you can also win it for yourselves, and I'm going to help you win it for yourselves, because that will also mean I will win it for me. If he was able to do that, then Portugal would be a massive, massive title candidate.
Yeah, so finally, as we wrap up, you're going for Spain, clearly, from what you've said, yeah? They're going to, if it comes to Portugal versus Spain in a World Cup final, it would be Spain for you, would it?
Well, the thing is, we saw the League of Nations and Portugal won against Spain. So it was very curious because everyone was expecting Spain to hammer Portugal because of Cristiano and all the other greatest elements the Spanish side had. But on those moments, I think Portugal, if Portugal comes as an underdog, they perform better if they are favorites. I think they thrive to be underdogs. Whenever Portugal had the responsibility of performing at their best, they flunked. They flunked in Brazil in 2014 when everyone was expecting them to try to win the World Cup and they never left the group stage. They flunked in 2002 when they also arrived after doing a brilliant Euro 2000 and they never left the group stage. So I think Portugal is never very comfortable being the favorites. Whether if they find the possibility of playing the final against Spain, I think everyone will say Spain would be the favorites because they probably play a more attractive style of football. They have the better individual players. So I actually would say that will be a 51-49% final, the 51 for Spain, but the difference wouldn't be as big as we would probably expect. But still, I would give it to Spain if there was against the two.
See, Tim, I feel that there would be some kind of poetic completion to the story of Cristiano Ronaldo if he were to win the World Cup for Portugal, only because his great nemesis, Lionel Messi, won it last time, and now he'd win it this time, and then you could sort of close that book on which one of them was the greatest footballer of their generation. You know, it would be a draw, wouldn't it? It'd be a draw. Whereas at the moment, Lionel Messi's got the edge. Well,
it will be a never-ending debate.
Of course,
indeed, yes, yeah, but don't say that to my grandson. We fight like cats and dogs about this. He's very much in the corner of Cristiano Ronaldo. You mentioned that Messi is Cristiano Ronaldo's nemesis. I don't think Ronaldo is Messi's nemesis. I don't think he cares. It's not important to him, you know. He just gets out and does his thing, you know. He said not long ago, yeah, I don't like it, these players who are obsessed with individual honours. You know, that was a little barb, maybe. That was a little dart aimed at Cristiano Ronaldo. But how lucky?
No, I just would say that for me personally, I'm with Tim. I think Messi is the better player all day around. But I actually do think that until 2017-18, I think Messi was into the competition because there have been loads of interviews in Spain of players who play with both, and they say they're highly competitive. And that whenever Messi witnessed Cristiano score a hat-trick, he will be extra motivated to score a hat-trick himself. And the same with Ronaldo. I remember Angel Di Maria said in an interview that he never saw two ferocious competitors as those two, and that they were always trying to mimic each other. So I think until 2017-18, they were actually really competing. But then I think Cristiano just flunked, and Messi, the last years in Barcelona and then at PSG, were also years where we'll probably not look back with as good memories. So I think in the end, the win at Qatar really changed Messi's mentality for good.
Argentina became from the Copa America in 2019. Argentina became his priority. That became the place where he was going to, because he'd done it all with Barcelona. He was starting to fall out with them anyway, and you could really feel it in 2019, which was when the World Cup winning side started to come together quite timidly. But he was just totally different. Whereas before, it was quite hard for people to play with him or to be with him because he didn't talk to anyone else apart from Aguero. You know, he's very self-contained nature. And Scaloni wouldn't pick Aguero for a while just to try and get Messi to talk to someone else, you know. And then Messi didn't need that anymore. Suddenly in that Copa America 2019, he sensed that he was playing with his fan club. And he liked that. And Tevez had gone, and I think that's important in the dynamics of the dressing room. Because, you know, they were both competing to be the Maradona heir. And Tevez' international record is dreadful because he had his thunder stolen by Messi. You know, Messi came along and took the thing that he always thought was going to be his. But from 2019, Messi suddenly becomes this vocal leader, whereas he wouldn't speak to anyone before. Suddenly you couldn't shut him up. And I think that lifted that Argentina team up to the point where they have won 2 Copa Americas and a World Cup, a little bit like Spain winning those 2 Euros and a World Cup in the middle. If they do it again, and there is the finalissima between them next month, which Argentina really don't want to play, but they're gonna have to play. But if and there is a possibility of this second round meeting between them. If one of them comes first in the group and one of them comes second, they meet as early as the second round, which I think gives both of these teams a very powerful incentive, both to win their groups.
And the fan club concepts that Messi had in Argentina, I think that's what Cristiano was looking for in Portugal. Because when he left Real Madrid in 2018, he still believed that he could perform at the highest level at Juventus. But then after the second season at Juventus, he actually understood that he will not have another opportunity to fight for the Champions League, which was his primary aim. So I really think that he tried to create that sort of culture within Portugal. And it's actually true. A lot of players like Bruno Fernandes, for instance, often told the press that they want to win for him. So he actually had some of the players, because when Cristiano started to play for Portugal in 2003, most of the players weren't even born there. Some of the players that are being called up for the national side were still struggling around as kids playing in the park. So they actually grew up with Cristiano as the maximum icon of Portuguese football. So it's normal for them also, like it happened with Argentina, to want to win for him, alongside him. And that's also why I think that Ronaldo is going to the World Cup, because if you ask for all the players, they know they are being limited by his presence, but at the same time, we are playing with the greatest of our time in their head. So that's a plus any player would like to have in their history. And I think that sort of mentality could help in some occasions, probably. Like in the final of 2016, when Cristiano was sub in the 17 or 18 minute, a lot of the players later said that we wanted to prove the world that we could win without him. But at the same time, we wanted to win for him, because they knew how important it was for Cristiano to win something for Portugal. So I think that fan club mentality on the two nations will be a very interesting take with the World Cup that we're going to watch.
Excellent.
Reminds me a little bit of a guitarist I saw interviewed, who, as a young man, played with James Brown, and he said, it's very, very repetitive. It's just the same. It's the same chord. It's very, but you've got to be alert when he goes to the bridge. You've got to go to the bridge. And the guitarist said, "Well, you know what? I didn't go to the bridge." And that ended my association with him, because he sacked me. But I still played with James Brown.
This is true. Having said that, James Brown says, "Take me to the bridge. Take me to the bridge." He says it over and over again. You can't
I think the fellow was asleep, because he'd been playing the same chord for 5 minutes,
Reminds me of the, sorry we've gone off on a tangent, Miguel. This is the final one, I promise you. Reminds me of the bloke that used to played bass on one of the Thelonious Monk albums, Thelonious Monk being the godfather of bebop, you could argue, jazz pianist. And he said, look, I saw the film, the guy was speaking, and he said, look, the one thing about playing with Thelonious Monk is that he only ever did one take. So they showed him in black and white, going to the recording studio, playing a tune, putting on his coat, and the producer coming out and saying, whoa, 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 where are you going, Thelonious? And he said, look, I'm going home, And he said, but we haven't started recording. And Thelonious Monk goes, oh, God, nobody listens to me. He had a little bit of mental health problems anyway. But anyway, so just in reflection of this, he said, yeah, you had to be always careful with Thelonious Monk, that he only ever did one take. So as a musician, that sharpened your mind, because you didn't want to be known as the musician that played the bum note on the Thelonious Monk album. Yeah, all of these things. Miguel, it's been a real pleasure, Thank you very much.
Certainly has.
Yeah, you've taken us through talking about Vinicius Junior and what went on last night, but also talking about the chances of Spain and Portugal in the coming World Cup. Thank you very much. Miguel's book is Passion. It's a journey through the soul of Spanish football. And obviously, we'll have you back anytime you fancy, Miguel. And you can join us again tomorrow for the Global Soccer Initiative, or even if you like, Global Soccer Interactive, part of the Brazilian Shirt Name podcast. It's a tongue twister. What can I say? See you tomorrow at 4.
Get in touch with the Brazilian Shirt Name podcast on Twitter at BrazilShirtPod, or you can email us BrazilianShirtNamePod@gmail.com. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe, rate and tell a friend. The Brazilian Shirt Name podcast is an 1129 production.